Last week, Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall introduced a new white paper outlining Labour's changes to the benefit system in the first major shake-up since Ian Duncan Smith introduced universal credit in 2010.
This white paper starts to turn the corner on the last 14 years, putting forward the real reforms we need to get more people into work and on at work, to give young people the very best start in life, and to ensure our employment and social security system understand this fundamental issue that a healthy nation and a healthy economy are two sides of the same coin.
The government plans to, and I quote, get Britain working and off benefits. They want to cut the welfare bill, which has ballooned since the COVID crisis. And to do this, they are launching a new National Jobs and Careers Service to replace outdated job centres. And with 2.8 million people out of work due to long-term sickness, there'll be much more coordination between employment and health support.
A major focus of this plan is the nearly 1 million young people, 1 in 8, who are not in education, employment or training. Joining us now to give us the lowdown on why that figure is so high and to find out if the government's plan will work is Jacob Diggle. He's the Director of Strategy, Research and Impact at UK Youth, a charity that champions youth work. Hi Jacob, welcome to Pod Save the UK.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's a very serious job title, isn't it? Director of Strategy, Research and Impact.
Impact, yeah. The pressure is on the shoulders. Fortunately, got a team that do the hard work, and I just get to talk about it.
So look, this is a pretty dismal statistic. 1 in 8 young people out of work. Why do you think youth unemployment is so high at the moment?
Yeah, it's a really hard figure to get your head around. We talk about 1 million young people without any education, employment or training. It just sort of becomes another one of these things that washes over us.
Yeah.
That's like twice the population of Iceland, which are just young people sitting without hope, without opportunities, without the kind of self-worth that comes from feeling like, actually, yeah, I'm good at something. I've got a community that comes with that. It's a pretty bleak statistic, and it's getting worse. I mean, it's worse by 150,000 since the beginning of this year alone. And that's going in completely the opposite direction to our other employment statistics. It's, as with all complex social issues, there isn't just one cause, but there are 2 big factors that we hear from youth workers and the research tells us. One is about mental health. Right. This isn't young people not wanting to work. This is young people not being well enough to work. And if you've underinvested in youth mental health services for such a long time, you're going to get a lot of young people who are feeling really unwell, and you've missed out on the early intervention support. And so the needs that young people have got now are really complex. And so we've got 1 million young people, half of those, 500,000 of them, are not working because they're too unwell to work, not just because they can't find a job. And so that's a really big driver we've got here. The second one is we know it's difficult economic times. Employers are feeling a bit risk averse, and young people sometimes feel a bit like a gamble.
Yeah.
Which means that the meaningful opportunities to get some work experience, to prove that you can make a good contribution, but also to kind of get a sense of like, what does it mean for me in a working world? What kind of jobs I actually want to do? Those opportunities aren't available to people. And frankly, the way that we talk about young people in society in general reinforces that risk aversion from employers. You know, we talk about young people as if they're problems, not people, right? We talk about the challenges they're facing, rightly, but we don't talk as much about all the amazing potential they've got and all the amazing things they've got to contribute.
Is there a regional element to this? I happen to see some statistics about the areas where there's the most claimants for out-of-work benefits. And it seemed to me that, like, as you pointed out, you know, these issues are related to other issues around like poor social care, lack of good jobs, the levelling up project that completely failed. I just wondered if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, so it's a challenge nationwide. So in some of the regions of the country where the youth unemployment rates are lowest, they're still about 10%, right? So they're still really high.
Right.
But we've got areas like bits of Liverpool where the rates are almost 20%, wow. Right? So we've got really big regional variation. And that is tied into the broader prospects for those areas where we've seen big cuts to public services and we've seen real reductions in terms of economic activity and jobs available. So it really is a bit of a perfect storm in some areas. And I guess this is where we're trying to be a bit hopeful about this. I think the white paper has, the government's announced with their kind of plans for reform here, are trying to take a kind of more tailored approach to this rather than a one size fits all. So when they're talking about their youth guarantee, so the government's promise that young people should have access to really meaningful training or a good job, they're trying to pilot how to do this in 8 what they call trailblazer areas, which are areas where they've got some of the highest rates of youth unemployment, because what is needed in Liverpool and what's needed in Middlesbrough, they are different, even though the problems are equally high. And so we are really pleased to see there's that attempt to try and lean into what do communities want themselves and how do you tailor support for them.
So can I ask, because look, when I heard that they were doing away with the old job centres to something a bit more compassionate and joined up, I thought that was wonderful. I mean, I often say that the job centre is a shame centre, and you go in and through bureaucracy, they essentially ring a bell and say, shame, 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 like Game of Thrones. I mean, it seemed a lot more about punishment and administering benefits and actually helping people. So that all sounded great. But what actually is on offer? It's not clear to me. They talked about work placements. How do you get work placements if there isn't jobs in the area, if there's not businesses in the area? Will the placements be unpaid? What's the likelihood they'll become jobs? What actually is going to happen?
I mean, the reality is we don't really know at this point. What the government's announced with this white paper is a commitment to a couple of principles, right? It's saying that the support that people need isn't going to be available from just one person, but the support itself should be joined up rather than making that person ping pong around, right? So we need to integrate better health and mental health support into employment support, right? When we're administering benefits, we shouldn't just be thinking about it's about the benefit, yes or no, but also broader careers advice, thinking about the wider role of things like youth work in helping a young person figure out what is that I actually want to do, how do I try and navigate these challenges? So the government's saying, we recognise that there are multiple sources of support needed and we should join them up. How that actually works, how that's going to be funded, they haven't got the answers yet. And we really hope that there is a meaningful commitment to working with experts who have been delivering these services on the ground and with young people to iron out those details, because they're really important details.
So you could say that the carrot part of this has not been decided, but the stick part of this definitely has, right? The cuts to benefits to young people who refuse to work. My concern is that there's no evidence that sanctions work, and it just pushes people into further poverty. What's the thinking here?
Yeah, so this is being described as a youth guarantee, so that everyone aged 18 to 21 should have access to meaningful training or a job. But it comes with a big stick, which is saying if you don't take up the opportunities available to you, we will sanction your benefits. Whether that's going to be all of your benefits removed or whether that's going to be some of it, that's up for consultation. But the stick is very much there. I think the reality is young people need to be given really high quality opportunities, because if you're being told we're going to take away all your money unless you take this really bad job that's really bad for you, or this slightly meaningless training course, right, which isn't going to give you any meaningful skills, that's not a real choice. That's not a real offer of support. This guarantee is a promise to young people, right? It's saying that we think you need to have a great start and we're going to give you a boost, right? But it can't just be another stick to beat young people with when young people are making really meaningful choices about actually, how do I fit this work opportunity with my caring responsibilities, with my health? They need to be supported to make those trade-offs and not be forced into some of these really difficult choices.
One figure that we do have is this £45 million that's dedicated to matching up 18 to 21-year-olds with work and training. So this is a concrete amount of money. So, Jacob, for like an organisation like yours, is your focus now on the spring review and pressuring the government to actually commit these kind of sums of money?
Absolutely. The spring spending review is a huge opportunity where we're going to see whether the government is prepared to invest in the promises it's made. At this moment, there's a lot of warm language. But actually the level of resource to deliver on those promises isn't there. The reality is, at the budget that we just had a couple of weeks ago, national government spending on youth services reduced by £25 million next year, right? So the recognition of the problem and the commitment to try and change something for young people is there from the government. The actions they're actually taking in allocation of resource are going in the opposite direction. And that puts a huge pressure on the spring spending review. There are so many different bits of government that are crying out for resource, and they're going to have to make hard trade-offs and choices. The challenge is, and we would argue, if you're not putting young people at the front of that list, you're just storing up problems for future generations.
Yeah. Yes, because am I right in thinking that if you're unemployed under the age of 23, you'll have problems with your wages up to 20 years later, maybe even further? I wonder if you could just tell me about how this age is so crucial for the rest of their lives.
Right, absolutely. We talk about this as a scarring effect, right? And it's a really important moment when you first enter the job market and you're trying to get your first experiences of work. If you've got a difficult experience, you've got a really bad first experience of work, or you're really struggling to get a job in the first place, we know that has a really long-lasting effects on your work outcomes for the rest of your life. So if you are unemployed as a young person, around that kind of 18 to 21 age group, you are much less likely to be employed when you're 40, 45. And if you've got a really negative experience of work, you get the same knock-on effects later on in life. And that's a really important thing that we sometimes miss out. It's not just any job at any cost. A lot at the moment is focused on, just need to get someone into a job. Yeah. But actually, once you sign the contract, the support can't go away at that point.
So earlier we were actually talking about Labour and whether they have a optimistic vision of the future, whether they're communicating it well, and if they don't, how they could be seriously threatened by the right. And when I'm talking about the right, I don't just mean the Tories, I mean Reform, who are doing quite well with younger people. Do you think this is politically, it could be good for Labour? I mean, it's certainly politically important, right?
I think any government needs to present a more hopeful message to young people who are facing a pretty bleak and uncertain future, right? We're all aware of the impact of the climate crisis, right? The challenges we've just been talking about in terms of employment prospects, the kind of division that we've seen in society and the race riots earlier this year. Young people are looking at that and saying, I don't know where I can contribute to this, and I don't feel that hopeful that things are going to be better for me. We are now got the generation of young people who, for the very first time for over 100 years, are feeling less hopeful about the future than their parents did, right? And the government has a really important role in setting out an optimistic vision for this, because if young people don't feel like they've got hope and they don't feel like they've got something to contribute, you're going to see an increase in nihilism. You're going to see a breakdown in terms of community trust and cohesion. And then it's going to become a kind of let's just burn it down mentality rather than a hopeful one where people feel actually I'm building to something and I'm part of something. The government's got a really key role in setting that out.
And how do you square this rhetoric, welcome rhetoric about engaging with young people, with the idea that in the budget we lost money from youth service? How do you? Because I'm scratching my head here. That doesn't make it doesn't make a bit of sense to me.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make economic sense. It doesn't make political sense. It doesn't make moral sense, right? In youth services, and those take many different forms, right? Some of that's like the uniformed youth services like Scouts and Guides, right? Some of those are the traditional youth clubs that you go to on a Tuesday night. Some of those are detached youth workers going to street corners or to skate parks where young people are. Some of this is about like residential outdoor learning experiences, right? All of these different amazing youth services have got a thing in common, right? They're providing a trusted adult who's not a parent, who's not a teacher, who's not trying to get something from you, but is solely there to help you figure out who you are, what you want to achieve in the world, and help you navigate the challenges in your life. What we know is there are 14 million young people in the UK. 4 million of them have access to youth work regularly. That's amazing. It's a miracle, right? It's a fantastic thing that's changing millions of young lives every week. It's also a scandal because it means you've got 10 million young people who don't have any of that at all. And it's disproportionately missing for young people who have no other support in their life, who don't have other trusted adults to turn to. Over the last 15 years, we've cut government funding into youth services by 3/4, right? At the same time, we've almost doubled spending on child safeguarding and children in care. Right? Because we've created an emergency and a crisis where we have to step in and intervene. The state has to take over the parent's role, and we've taken away all of the preventative support, which is stopping the problem happening in the first place. It makes absolutely no economic sense. All the research shows about the impact of youth work is that it reduces youth mental health problems, it improves employability, and it reduces crime in a community. There was research published by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, that really respected economics think tank, just last week, showing that in London, when you closed youth centres, crime went up, violent crime went up, and GCSE results were half a grade to a grade lower at GCSE for the young people in those areas following the closures of those youth centres, right? The benefit of youth services has been proven to be £3.20 for every pound you put in. Right now, when we've got huge pressure on the public purse, right, and we're having to spend emergency funds on the NHS, on mental health services, on transform the welfare benefits bill, right, on increased policing in communities because we're worried about community safety. We've got an intervention which is proven to be one of the most effective preventative interventions. If you only care about this in economic terms, you'd be pumping all your money into your services.
Yes.
Let alone the moral and ethical argument.
Yeah,
which is, like, let's set some young people up for life. Right?
Yeah. If I was to sort of wave a magic wand right now and set out recommendations. So we've got this white paper that's like, cool, we're going to be nicer to people and not punch them in the face, which has basically been the policy of the last 40 years. If you're a young person, you get punched in the mouth.
Free punch for the under 18s.
It won't be executed by the state. It'll be outsourced to a private company to do the punching. But if I was to wave a magic wand now and say you could design a system that will come out of the recommendations in the white paper and then be joined up with financing from the Spring Review, what would that look like?
I think there are three bits for it to me. One is we'd be genuinely investing in youth work and youth services, but youth work alone can't carry the whole burden. And we've seen the challenges that teachers have been facing, right? And feeling like they've got the whole world on their back. All of these different professionals, whether it's social workers or teachers or people in the criminal justice system, they're all trying to do their best for young people. Right now, the policy pulls them in loads of different directions, and there's not real dedicated money to the cross-sector collaboration, cross-professional joint working together. That has to be at the heart of implementing any change. And then the third really important piece of this is we need to give young people time, right? It takes time to learn. It takes time to figure out what's going to work for you and what doesn't. We learn best by making mistakes. And if we create a system, particularly a benefit system where there's a really harsh financial sanction if your benefits get taken away, if we create a system that gives young people one shot, right?
Yeah.
All the pressure is, look, all these really bad things have happened in your life. Some of them big world events like the pandemic, some of them real personal tragedies like your caring responsibilities or how you've been treated. All these bad things have happened to you for 15 years. And you've spent the last 2 years, left school, didn't really have good qualifications, not really sure what you're supposed to be doing. You've got one shot to take this, even if it is good training, even if it is a good work experience.
You know what I mean?
You've got
So
one
much
shot.
pressure.
And if you get this wrong, that's your fault, you failed. Right, and then we're like the mask slips, and we're going to go back to punishment only. We need a system that gives young people time to make mistakes, time to learn. And one of the most powerful things that youth workers do, and this is tested day in, day out in youth centres across the country, is to say to a young person, like, you can't get rid of me, right? Ultimately, you're going to mess up, and I'm still going to be here. Right? And that's how you build trusting relationships.
I'm going to cry. Don't push me. Do not push me. I will cry. It's so simple and so beautiful and so cost effective. It's so annoying. It's not happening. Also, just thank you for shouting out the scout leaders on this one. My other half did scouts when he was a kid, and you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell now. He's an adult man, and he's just like, he's like, oh, does someone need a compass?
The range of knots that are available.
He doesn't get lost. He never feels lost. He did orienteering. It's a really nice thing.
It's a perfect example because the types of support, the types of youth work that different young people need is going to be different, right? Because they're diverse groups. Some people, scouts is going to be amazing, right? For other people, it's going to feel like their absolute worst nightmare. They're going to want something different, right?
For me, worst nightmare. Absolute worst nightmare.
And that's why we've got a diverse range of youth services. And that's why we should give young people genuine and meaningful choice.
Jacob, thank you so much for joining us on Pod Save the UK.